welcome everybody to the November 4th edition of the Central School Board of Directors meeting. Would you please join us in the flag salute? Don, would you mind leading us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to turn it over to the superintendent to go over tonight's agenda.
We have a couple adjustments. Unfortunately, we got an email today. The president of Chemeketa will not be with us today, so she is going to reschedule that. So we'll look for a different date. And then in the consent agenda, we actually do not have any personnel recommendations for this month's meeting, so those are the two changes.
Okay, let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first topic up is communications from the floor. I'd like to go ahead and read the statement before we get into that. Welcome to the Central School District Board meeting. Comments from the community are entertained during the time designated under Communications Public Comments. If you wish to speak to the board, please fill out a comment card and turn it into the board secretary or board chair at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' comments in this forum are limited to 3 minutes, but the board welcomes additional information in writing. Personnel laws prohibit the board from hearing public complaints about an individual in an open meeting. All complaints must go through the board's approved processes outlined in Board Policy KL. This form may be found at our website or by calling the district office. Typically, a speaker's comment is taken under advisement to allow time for the board to review an issue. However, the board chair or other board members may ask a speaker for additional information or may convey to the speaker some information that addresses their comment. Please note on the speaker card if you would like to receive a follow-up communication, and if so, what avenue is preferred. Thank you for coming to tonight's school board meeting. Okay. So we have a couple of speaker cards. The first one is Sean Cantrell.
Sean, yes.
Sean?
My name's Sean Cantrell. I'm on here on behalf of my wife, Amy, and I are here. Have never been to one of these before, so this is completely outside of the lines for me. So, would you like? Do I explain why I'm here and what the concern is?
Yeah. Typically, if you have a concern or
okay.
you just want to make sure the board is aware of something.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I won't even attempt to try and pronounce your last name, but I spoke with Jennifer. Spoke a couple times. Most recently, it was last week regarding an incident that took place with our daughter, London, who attends Ash Creek Elementary, which we love. She loves. And the school is great. What happened essentially was she's out playing, kids do their thing. Father, six grandkids, so I've kind of heard all the things they come up with of how it wasn't their fault. But she was playing a game, she got tackled, this kid allegedly pinned her down and she was crying, and then it kind of led into this kid had been bullying her a little bit. We didn't know about this. That led into her explaining to us that this child came to her later that day and said he was going to bring a stun gun and handcuffs to school. So she came home, told my wife. My wife tried getting a hold of the school. It was a bit late. There was nobody that could really be gotten a hold of, so we got some advice to call the non-emergency 911. So that's what we did. Basically, it was handled from there. The school, everybody jumped and they were very concerned. The principal, I got a call from Jennifer as well, bringing their concern. We were certainly very, very concerned. Gun, stun gun, I don't really, this day and age, I don't think I have to explain the concern. One of the things that is my and my wife's biggest concern, and I did not come here like I have all the answers. I don't. I have suggestions. But we don't want to just be doing this from the sideline. So we're here one of the big concerns I have, my wife has, is that we can walk through the front door of any one of the schools that our kids either have attended or currently do attend. I believe the schools are excellent. When my daughter, we kept her from school for a week because we just weren't sure. We haven't been involved in a situation like that. It's scary. It is very scary. So that's the big concern that we have. is, moving forward, are there some steps? Is there something we can do? Are there some ideas out there? I know there are other schools that do lock their front doors. I'm an elevator mechanic. I've serviced many schools in the past, and most of them, I have to tell you, you have to be buzzed in, badged in. You have to show why you're there. You have to have some credentials as to what your business is there. And I think that's obviously one thing that some schools are doing. So, again, I don't have all the answers to this, but we have a son who goes to the high school here. He'll be graduating next year. Loves it. Our daughter goes to Ash Creek. Loves it. It broke her heart, mine as well, to keep her out of school for a week. She cried. She wanted to go back to her teacher, her principal, and her friends. So the school responded very positively to us, and I know that they care, and I believe everybody here does care, and I don't claim to have all the answers. I want to be a part of the solution, but that is, in a nutshell, why we were here.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Sean. It is a serious thing, and I think we've got some upcoming committees, and that's something we want to take a look at, is the physical security in the buildings, and start to incorporate that, and see what others are doing as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
I think that's great.
Yeah, we hear you, and we'd love to reach out to you and get you involved in some of that if you guys are willing.
Explained to
Yeah.
Jennifer, we don't want to just be the one squeaking from the sidelines. Again, we don't have all the answers to this, and we can truly appreciate. As I told her, as I told the principal, I would not want your guys' job. It's just there's a lot. There's just so much involved with it on a good day, and not to mention some of the challenges that come around.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you for coming out and sharing that with us.
Thank you for your time.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then Jessica Steed, do you want to come forward and share your, concern? Good to see you.
Yes, good to be back again. Tonight, I am a district employee, but I am here tonight as a district parent. There's been a practice or an issue creeping into our athletic programs that I wanted to address. It's not totally widespread. It hasn't affected my family yet, but I wanted to address it before it gets to a point where it becomes a problem in our family, and that is sports teams holding practices on Sundays. For many in our community, Sunday is the day that we set aside for God and family. And when coaches make mandatory practices on Sundays, we're putting our children in a difficult situation where they have to choose between following their coach or following their parents and the traditions of their family that have been set forward. Sunday is also a great day, is a family day for us. I don't know how other parents feel, but I know that when my daughter enrolled in 9th grade, this automatic countdown clock started ticking down to the amount of time I have left with her in my home. You think only 4 more Christmases, 4 more summers, every weekend, every time that we have with her. It matters a lot to us. And our student athletes are incredibly busy. They practice late hours, they do homework late at night, they work very hard, and family time is extremely precious to us. Sundays are have been a great day for us to reconnect and to relax and enjoy our time together, as well as our worship. I know not every student athlete comes from a family with these traditions or from even a strong family structure, but all our student athletes are growing teens. Their bodies are exhausted. They work hard at practice, they work hard at school all week, and they need a little time off to rest and recover. If we're having practices 6 to 7 days a week, that's really hard on them to be ready to face the next week of school ahead. So I'm not opposed to athletics. I love the opportunities that our athletics programs provide. Was not a student athlete myself, so it's a new community for me, but I've loved watching how it's benefited my daughter, how it's benefited her friends. She's made great friends, great relationships with coaches, and I love how it keeps students accountable. and it creates a great sense of community in the district. I'm happy to support sports. I will pack team dinners. I will drive to early morning practice. I will wash mounds of Yankee nasty laundry. I will buy frozen pies. I will cheer the team on in terrible weather. I will talk my daughter down after a bad game. I love it. I will support it. And in return, I would appreciate the support of coaches and the schools supporting me and my family as we are trying to instill the value of Sabbath observance and family time during the few short years that we have left with our daughter.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah. Jessica, did you want us to follow up with you?
Yes, I don't think I checked a
Yeah,
box. So.
yeah. I think it's important that we do.
Okay.
So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll talk and review policies and check into it and get back to you with what our thoughts are.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you again. Okay, that brings us to our standing reports and recognition. First up are our student reports. Do we have someone from ASBEC tonight? Awesome.
I'm Hazel Lightham. I'm ASB Vice President, and we left off last week. We were just at the start of homecoming week, so we had that, and it went really well. We worked on supporting our student athletes and getting people out to their games, and also involving our special ed students in the activities of homecoming week. And then next we had our blood drive. We collected about 55 pints of blood, so that was good. And then we just got back from our OSCA leadership convention thing today, and we learned a lot of really great lessons. And the biggest thing I thought was we had the speaker, and we want to work on maybe bringing him to our school because he just had a lot of really great messages, and I think he could be a really great asset to our school and encourage people. And then coming up is Thanksgiving luncheon at the end of the month, and our student staff liaison is working really hard to get donations from our community's businesses, and that's about it going on right now.
Thank you, Hazel. Great update. Next up are our Power Peers, or our Power Peer representatives.
Hi, I'm Nayeli Lopez, and I'm here to represent Power Peers.
And I'm Ayan. I'm also here to represent Power Peers.
So this Saturday, a lot of the people from Power Peers went to this leadership convention called iLead. And every year they have like a new like motto for the convention that day. And this year the motto was break the stigma. So it was teaching us how to break the stigma about mental health and how we can help people with mental health issues in our school.
And then we also had our purpose video that went out last month. And so what we did, we actually had each member of the Power Peers class go to each PSP class and actually like present the lesson so that the kids were like more informed and not just like the video like give it to them, so they actually have their peers teaching the lesson to them. And so far we got good feedback from it. So.
And then on Halloween we had our fall ball, which went really well. We had a lot of students come, and during the fall ball we had a movie playing in the alumni gym, so for people who liked like to be like didn't like dances, they liked more relaxing type of things but still be able to like have a place to be on Halloween. And we're thinking about incorporating that into more dances in the future.
We also got asked by the principal to do an RSVP. I forgot exactly what it stood for, but it just to get the students' voices of like how they want like things in the school to change, or like what's going good and what's going bad. So Power Peers, ASBEC, and I think there was another group involved. Avid? Yeah, Avid was involved. So we all went to different PSP classes and presented that lesson to them and got their feedback. And I believe we're going 3 more times throughout the school year to get their voices heard. And then we also, this Friday, our YAC group is going to Salem for, I forgot the name of it, but we're going so we could get feedback for our health center, and I think it's about mental health. So we're just gonna get information there and bring it back to the school.
And I'm going to add, excuse me, RSVP stands for Raising Student Voice and Participation. It's a nationally recognized student council approach of how you get student voice within your school, and you go through 3 or 4 summits a year, and it is led by students. Staff is there, but they are not they are there for supervision and not to really get say in that process. It's true student voice. And then just YAC stands for Youth Advisory Council. That is, our students are involved with the health center.
Thank you.
Very good, great update. And all of you, thank you for coming out, and we really appreciate your leadership, your willingness to come and share the updates with us. And if there's anything you need, go to your principal, but you can come back and ask for support, and we love hearing from you. And also let your classes know and your aspect leaders know. We really appreciate all the work that they do, and it's really important in our high school in particular. So thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our association reports, CEA. Coming up, Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Jordan. I'm the CEA building representative at the high school, and a lot of people at the high school wanted to share some of the wonderful things that they are doing. The Spanish 3 class is attending a college-level Spanish class at Willamette on November 15th. They're the only high school in Oregon to have this opportunity at Willamette. They'll also be attending a college admissions presentation and see the exhibits at the Hallie Ford Art Museum. The Alt Ed pilot program, Phase 2, is currently serving 16 students at Henry Hill and is poised to increase capacity to 20 students by semester 2. The program is in full swing and is still developing. Students are learning sewing, graphic design, yoga, and cooking skills in addition to core academics. We are successfully serving students with unique and abundant needs in conjunction with our community partner, Community Services Consortium. Board members are invited to lunch and conversations with students in Henry Hill Room 11 from 12:30 to 1 o'clock any day of the week. We currently have 4 teen parents in our teen parent program. They have abundant needs. We are supporting them the best we can and have formulated plans for more partner engagement. Nikki Hansen is the teen parent coordinator and alternative education teacher. The theater department just finished a successful run of the fall musical, 13 the Musical. We are pleased to have students from across our diverse population involved, including kids from our Latino, SPED, and general populations. 13 was not only a fun production, but it had a great message. Our students hope that the message that it is good to be yourself and to be patient with each other as we learn and grow together spoke to the community. Monday, we began auditions for our winter musical, Thoroughly Modern Millie. Also, we're having a great time in our stage makeup, tech, and world theater classes. Both the world theater and production classes are making progress with their upcoming performances. They are hopeful that many people in our community will come out to support them and to see what they are learning, as well as the messages they hope their production will share. In addition, the stage is now hopping with activity from a band concert to cabaret. In November, we began hosting the elementary schools for their fall performances, and in December, we began our winter concert season. The auditorium is a hopping place. The biology department reports that they just received the salmon eggs in the classroom as part of their Eggs to Fry program. They visited the National Primate Research Center to learn about medical research and careers in the anatomy class in October, and are headed out to the Oregon Research Hatchery in Alsea this week in marine biology to learn about salmon research and careers. Biology, again, is learning about ecology. We'll be starting the project this month utilizing the Wetlands Grant through the Watershed Council. Also, anatomy completed their bone break lab as part of their skeletal unit and will be doing their chicken wing dissection this week. The basic life skills classroom has started taking orders for homemade dog treats. Senior College Writing went on a field trip to the Wu Hammersley Library on Thursday, where they were hosted in a lab, and students learned to do college-level research on scholarly sources using databases, ebooks, and physical library books. Mr. Robert Monge, anybody know? Monge, I'm going to assume, has been our contact there for about 5 years, and the trip was an excellent way to help these students earn college credit for Writing 121, as well as experience the campus. 2 students worked on applications while we were there, and 1 took her first ever college tour with a bilingual ambassador from WU. The yearbook staff is attending Fall Media Day at the University of Oregon Wednesday, where they will receive training in sports photography, layout, design, and feature writing, plus hear a keynote speaker presentation from a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. It is a fantastic opportunity for them to hone their journalism skills, as well as plan for the 2020 book and make it the best it can be. Keith Omlid will certify about 120 students this semester in first aid CPR and automated external defibrillation. By the end of the year, about 250 will be certified, and over just the last 15 years, roughly 3,000 students have been certified. Video production students have begun filming their first actual movies. They've just been practicing up until now. Global Studies students made a completed world map from scratch, building the grid, mapping out the continents, putting on the colors, and labeling all the places. A significant amount of seniors were able to register to vote in their American government classes. In shops, they have begun making wood CNC signs, cutouts, metal CNC signs, laser engraving, is available on cups, glass, marble, and other materials, and they have begun making their holiday wreaths. For the first time, they're going to be putting on a holiday wreath-making course taught by students. Finally, many of our avid seniors went on a college trip this weekend, and 5 returned from the trip with acceptance letters for college, and Avid is very excited about that. Thank you guys very much.
Awesome. Great update. Thank you. Next up is our OSCA update.
What I have to say is not near as exciting as what he had to say. Good evening. I would like to start out by saying thank you to each and every board member for giving your time and your expertise to Central School District. You, the board members, as well as our superintendent, live within the boundaries of this district, and you live alongside our students and families, and you care about our community, and specifically you care about our schools. Is there a picture? So if you look at this picture, it'd be a typical picture that most people have in mind when they think of school. Teachers teaching and students learning. After all, this is the whole purpose of school. However, if we look a little closer than what most people see on the surface and look behind the teacher and beyond the students and we will see the work of the support staff. We see the bus drivers who brought these students to school. We see the cooks who feed them breakfast and lunch so they are ready to learn. We see the IT staff who make sure the computers are working properly, the bookkeepers who order the classroom supplies, the librarians who make sure there are books on the shelves, the office staff who answer phones and update student data, the maintenance staff who checks plumbing, lighting, and makes sure the roof is not leaking, and at the end of the day, the custodians who sweeps the floor and empties the trash cans. So what do you, as board members, have in common with this group of support staff? Last week, I ran some data on our classified staff, and over 83% of them, like you, live within our community. They have a huge stake in our schools and our community, and like you, they live alongside our students and families. Earlier in the year, additional data revealed that our current classified staff have invested collectively 1,770 years working as employees within Central School District. This isn't just a passing investment of their efforts. This is an investment of their life in this community. So I have a short side story. In 1966, a movie came out starring Clint Eastwood called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. You guys are too young to remember that. But I remember going to see the Western movies at the drive-ins with my older siblings. I was the youngest, so the weight of my voice was not enough to sway any of them to go see my movies. And though I didn't have a lot of interest in their movies, I went along for the cartoons and the playground in front of the screen, and of course the popcorn. And I usually fell asleep long before the end of the movie, so I never knew how it turned out. So I gave this example because I see my job this year as union president to give a voice to our amazing support staff. I have asked them to share their stories with me, so in turn I can share them with you. We as support staff generally like our position of working behind the scenes. Very much so. This is not my comfort. And if I am unable to convince them to come and share their stories with you personally, I will come and bring those stories to you over the coming months during the OSCA reports at the board meetings. Some of them will be heartwarming, some will be heart-wrenching. There will be stories that are funny or uplifting, and some will be encouraging as well. What I want to do is share who we are, what is in our heart, and open a window to reveal to you what it looks like to be a support staff in our district. Clint Eastwood style, bringing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and hopefully mostly the good and the humorous as well. So.
Thank you.
And my partner in crime that was supposed to be here was going to start that out by sharing one of her stories, but she wasn't able to make it.
We will now move on to the administrative reports. Looks like we have a couple of those.
Well, we do. And so we're going to start first with, we wanted to share with the board a short presentation on the 2018-19 school district, Oregon Department of Education yearly at a glance and detailed information that shows our overall performance for 18-19. So again, I've shown you some of the first presentations we did was specifically for the assessment, our overall assessment, but now this is the report card for the school district that we're going to share with. So hopefully this is going to begin. The areas that we're going to focus on for tonight are specifically the Smarter Balance assessment, and it's going to be a snapshot, so you're going to see a handful of things, and I'm going to give a few details of it. We're going to share a little bit about regular attenders, our English language proficiency, our 9th grade on track, and our four-year graduation rates. And when I talk about the Smarter Balance assessment, it's specifically English language arts and mathematics. And all of our report cards, both the district report card as well as every school has an individual report card, can be found on our website. There's a link at the top that says About, and if you hover over that, there's a link that says State Report Cards, and all the 18-19 information is listed there. So behind you, I'm going to start back before we go to where we are right now. In 1999, the state legislature requested that the Oregon Department of Education provide educators and districts with an opportunity to communicate directly to the parents and community members about how our local districts and schools are performing. And again, this is specifically state-identified metrics. So again, as I shared, the data tonight will be specifically for our 18 and 19 school year. So I'm going to start with a couple highlights overall. You can see behind me our overall enrollment, as well as information on students who have qualified for free and reduced price lunches, the percentage of our students within our community with disabilities, our Ever English learners, which is at some point a student was in as a second language learner, and so that's a percentage that is with part of that. And then you'll see a newly identified data point down there called mobility of students. And that is how much a student both enrolls and unenrolls. So it could be they were pulled out, moved, and then tried to come back, or we also have things after 10 days if students are not within the school, we actually have to drop them by law, and if they re-enroll, so that is what's considered mobility. So that's a new data point that they have established for the 18-19 school year, and we'll see that moving forward. You also see on the right side our K-2 regular attenders information, which you can see we're still below the state average of 83%. But overall, this data right right here, there is minimal statistical changes from the 17-18 year to the 18-19 year. Our enrollment's very similar, as well as those demographics that I shared from that perspective. Slide 3 shows a slight increase in our growth of about 2% for our English language arts achievement, again on the Smarter Balance assessment in grade 3. And again, I'm showing you the district report card. You can go in and get every single school and look at each one of them, but this is the overall district. But you can also see a 6% decrease in mathematics at the 8th grade level. And again, we are seeing a trend in mathematics go in a negative direction, and we know we need to work through that. As I always do, I want to remind the board that this is a year-over-year data, not cohort data, right? Again, the cohort data is very important to me, but which means, again, these are not the same students. So when we look year over year, they're not the same cohort of students. We know that our focus on reading and language arts, specifically the essential standards with the work that we've been doing at the end of last year and this year, is continuing to improve our learning and growth for students across the district. And we are also continuing to focus this year on our work and looking at the math essential standards throughout the rest of the year. Slide 4 details our 9th grade on track to graduate. Really, which shows no change from the previous year. Again, we have a brand new principal that came in last year. So to be very honest, the fact that we don't have a shift in that is a positive thing. At times when you see leadership changes, there can be a negative decrease. We are really, at times when you're coming in as an administrator, you're learning the system, and don't do a lot of changes your first year because you're trying to learn what's really going on within the school. So the fact that there's no change, I see that as a positive from that piece. We do see a slight decrease in our 4-year on-time graduation. Again, what I'm proud of is Central High School is above the state average in graduation. I also think Principal Servignan and her team continue to build systems to support and monitor that on-track graduation. As an example, there is a group of staff, they're called the 9th grade on track team, working together, and it's both a mix of staff and administration working to make sure that kids are moving forward, really starting at the 9th grade level. So the next few slides is more of the year-over-year growth, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about this, because as we start talking about equity, this will start to help paint that picture of why and where our focus really will be as we start the strategic plan, which again is some of our next conversation. So this slide, we're going to show the overall growth still year-over-year of how the district is performing in areas that I shared in the beginning of the presentation. This slide shows the details of different student groups and our growth in K-5 English language arts. Our overall K-5 growth is average. So when you look on the upper right, you'll see level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. We want to be in level 4s and level 5s. Level 3 is average, level 2 is below average, level 1 is below average, and we have work to do there. So that just gives you an idea of where we are. So again, our student groups, for our growth in K-5, our overall growth is average for all students. So again, there's a median there. For our economically disadvantaged, and those are our students that are identified in the poverty, with poverty, our Hispanic, Latino, and underserved race and ethnicity. And to give you the definition from the Oregon Department of Ed, that underserved race and ethnicity includes student groups that are American Indian, Alaska Native, Black and African American, Hispanic, Latino, and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. So when they group all of the students together in that specific category. We have 2 high-performing groups overall in our English language arts for K-5, in our whites and our multiracial. And multiracial falls, that's the federal, really identified as a federal race, and it is specific to students, but it does not have in the report our Hispanic ethnicity. So I just want to make that clear from that perspective. That is specifically a federal race. And again, so those 2 groups are a high-performing group. And again, this is just a snapshot. You don't see all of those. If you go online, you can see the detailed report with that. So slide 6, this shows the 2 groups that are the low-performing groups for our K-5 in English language arts. They are specifically our English language learners as well as our students with disabilities. The next slide shows, again, the detailed growth of our grades 6 through 8 in English language arts. Our overall 6th through 8th growth is average, again, level 3 for all students. Economically disadvantaged students are English learners, Hispanic, Latinos, and our underserved race, ethnicity, and whites, our white students. And the district has one student group above average, which is identified as a level 4 or 5. We are identified as a level 4 for our multiracial students for 6 through 8 English language arts. Slide 8 shows two groups who are low performing in that group for 6th through 8th grade, specifically our students with disabilities and then our American Indian Alaska Native students. That N is very small. I believe our N this year is 11, if that's correct, on the data that you have there. So again, the N for that is a smaller group for us within our community. Slide 9 shows the detailed growth of our K-5 mathematics. And overall, we are slightly above average for all of our students in growth, also for our English language learners and our white students. We see an average growth at level 3 for our economically disadvantaged, our underserved race, ethnicity, Hispanic, Latino, and our multiracial. And then again, we have one group that is showing the low performing for K-5 math, which is our students with disabilities. The next one shows, again, 6th through 8th grade mathematics. Our overall 6th through 8th grade growth is average for students with disabilities, so that's the first time that we've seen that. Our students with disabilities in an average, above average, so that is great to see, especially in mathematics. And then our American Indian, Alaska Native, and our multiracial. The remaining groups do show as low performing within mathematics. And again, that's our overall, when you look at that meeting for all students, our economically disadvantaged students, English learners, Hispanic, Latino, and our underserved race, ethnicity, and our white students in mathematics for grades 6 through 8. The next slide is the Oregon Department of Education definition and background on how the state populates regular attenders. There are two things about regular attendance that I want to talk about. One is specifically regular attendance comes in because this is actually tied to our funding. Cease Kunt and I have a lot of conversation in regards to looking at attendance and our enrollment and how many kids are in school 90% of the time, because we have to calculate that, which is what is shared with the state 3 times a year, as I've shared before, on really how we are funded. So again, this is just to give you this measure is the number of students who are present more than 90% of the days they were enrolled. So are you physically 90% of the time in school on each school day? And this process actually begins in May. So they take the students that are enrolled in May, they start with that group of cohort, and then as we roll into the fall, those same students is where the population or the counts begin for each year. So slide 14 shows the details year over year for our K-5 regular attenders. So you can see across the district, all identified groups are low attenders. So again, that is, our principals are doing amazing work to try and reach out and build systems. I'll give a couple examples. There's a captain attendance that flies through Independence Elementary for acknowledging students that may have struggled with attendance, right? So they are trying to acknowledge kids when they are there. We have at MES, kids check in with different both principal and or staff to just have that quick check-in with students on how they're doing and those things. So every school does a version of how do we really get students to be able to be at school. So again, we have all groups identified at level 2, and then there's actually one group that's identified at a level 1. So that is concerning to us. The next slide shows the details of the 6th through 8th grade. Again, majority of the student groups are low attenders. We have 6 groups identified as level 2s, which fall into that median all schools, the economically disadvantaged, American Indian, Alaska Native, Hispanic, Latino, underserved race, ethnicity, and white. And 2 level 1 groups, our English learners and our students with disabilities. And the positive, we do have one group that has an average attendance, which again is our multiracial kids, so that's something to be excited about. The next slide shows really it's sort of deceiving. It says at the top 9 through 12, but if you look actually in the first column, it only is the 9th and 10th graders. So again, that's a conversation that I'm going to have with the state. I'm not sure why we only look at 9th and 10th grade when at the top it shows 9 through 12. But there are the positive here is there are 4 student groups that are average attenders. Again, that's all students in their median, Hispanic, Latino, our underserved race and ethnicity, and our whites. 1 group that is slightly above average in attendance, which is our multiracial students. And then there are 3 identified groups that are low attenders, our economically disadvantaged, our English learners, and our students with disabilities. The next slide shows our district on track for English language proficiency details. It's also known as, you guys have heard me use the term ELPA. So again, that stands for English Language Proficiency Assessment. For our K-5, we are average overall for our students who are English language learners who are on track to attain that actual English proficiency. Next is our 6th through 8th English language proficiency, where we again here are low performing for students to attain that English language actual proficiency. And then the next slide shows our 9th through 12th grade. Again, our English language proficiency is low performing. Last slide is a little bit more detail on the 9th grade on track. Again, year-over-year growth, so not the same students, but this is specifically just for Central High School. Our overall groups, excluding whites, were in the low in 9th grade on track credits for graduation. White students are average for being on track at that 9th grade level. And then finally, this one is looking at our 4-year cohort graduation details, year over growth. There are 3 identified groups that are performing slightly above average, and those are, again, all of our students, our whites and our multiracials. And again, that's really the level 4s. We have 2 groups who have average growth in graduation, which is our Hispanic, Latino, and underserved race and ethnicity, and 2 groups who are below our average growth, which are English language learners and our students with disabilities for the 4-year cohort graduation. So I just want to share a little bit of what we're doing and the next steps. Again, this is end of year, so right, we're looking back to move forward. I think it's data to just help us drive, and again, a lot of this information that I have shared this past spring, obviously this is the 18-19 last spring when I went out to the community chats, we shared 17-18 data. I will always be transparent. I think it's important to show where we are and the work that we're doing to move forward. Again, I think that we are moving in the right direction. I want to be clear that not always will you see a quick change in state assessment data from year over year. So again, that's going to take some time as we really start to align the work. And again, the next presentation is going to share a little bit more about that. So what have we done so far? We have begun to analyze each of the 5 buildings at each school. All 5 principals have actually used our data protocol to go through the data, really identify what their facts are and some next steps overall as they look at that. We're continuing to align our Common Core standards. Again, you're going to hear me talk a lot about the standards, that the standards help guide instruction. I say it's the pathway for teaching and learning. It's the art of teaching and learning, and how we really identify essential standards that will help kids to learn, because that's really what we want to focus on, kids learning and growing each and every day. And again, that alignment is both by grade level and content level, and then vertically. And when I say vertically, we have, as an example, a 2nd grade team may be working to identify their standards. They're also having conversation with their 1st grade group to say, let's look at your standards as we move from 1st grade to kindergarten. What are those key standards that we need to identify that are very important in that process, and that they're aligned? And then that 2nd grade group's also having that conversation with the 3rd grade group. Do we have all the essential standards that you need so when they come to 3rd grade they're prepared to make and have those next pieces? Again, it's a pretty intense process that our teachers are going through, really at the K-8 level. Not that we're not doing it at the high school, but there's a little bit of a different focus right now on some of the attendance and different things at the high school level from that perspective. And we're also looking at continuing to build our assessment. You're going to to hear me talk, and the principals at times talk about formative assessment. That is the day-to-day assessment of the standards that our teaching staff, as well as our instructional staff, are working with the students to say, are the students learning those standards that are going to help them move forward each and every day. So again, you're going to hear us talk about formative assessment, and then we do need to take, as I've told you, the state assessment, it is one accountability benchmark. It's a very important one, but there are also summative assessments that we can, what I call is take a dipstick at the middle of the year to make sure that we're on track. I say that because at times we believe that we have identified the key essential standards. Well, if we do a quick dip into third grade reading as an example, and overall, based off of the formative assessments we see, but in our interim assessment, we have one standard that all of our kids are not being successful at. We have to go back to the drawing boards and say, why are they not being successful? What do we need to look at differently? And that's the work with the principals and our teaching staff that we're continuing to do. I think it's also important, you see at the bottom here, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in our next presentation, but one of the key objectives that were identified really by our community, both in our students, our staff, and our community members, is that we are continuing to build an alignment for that K-12, and that one of our strategic objectives. So I think that that's going to be a big part of how we continue to do this work and how the data will move in that direction. So I'm going to pause for any questions on this, and as I pause, I'm going to ask Ms. Hallman and Ms. Ensminger to work their way up here to the front, because they're going to join me for the next part of the presentation. And Jared, if you want to flip to that other presentation for me. So questions of the overall data.
Quick question, Jen.
Yep.
We always look at how we compare the Oregon average, but as we've made the transition to the smarter balance, where is Oregon in rank these days? Are we still near the bottom?
We are one of the lowest performing states. Last year, I believe we were 48 out of 50. Again, I think this is where, and again, we're going to start to have the conversation about the Student Success Act and some of the work that we did this past year to get that legislation passed. I think that what our principals and our administrative teams and our teaching and our support staff are doing, and our conversations that we're having, as well as the direction that we're going, I think you're going to start to see those shifts and changes. It does take time, but I will tell you all, I think we have some of the best administrators. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of nationally recognized administrators. I have those or better here. And I am honored every day. I also say that about our teaching staff as well as our support staff. Carol said it nicely as we opened up. It takes all three of us, and we are collectively starting to work together to make sure that we can support students each and every day for where they want to learn and grow. So we're still in that low level. The overall, when you looked at the state for overall assessment for this, most of the district, really across the state, it was about a 1% drop for both in English language arts and mathematics across the state holistically.
And is this, the entire United States is not doing the same assessment?
Correct. Not everyone uses the Smarter Balance.
Yes,
so
correct.
That in itself is a big part of that conversation of how you identify. I do think that Oregon is a bit more stringent, and that's not a negative thing. I think it's what they are trying to build is getting students prepared. But again, I think there's some funding issues that have been in the past that I think that as we go through this moving forward could help. But I want to pause and remind everybody that data doesn't change overnight. It can take research shows between 3 and 5 years to really see that. I want to remind everybody that this is also a K-12 process. Again, there are lots of students that stay on track and graduate on time. We are, again, above the state average for graduation rates. But there are 15 to 20% based off of that can struggle at times, and so that's where we need to start to build positive supports and systems to support our students across the district, and then I'm going to say as well as our staff.
I just think it's really important for us to remember that data is only as good as the source of the
Yes.
information. And since all the states don't use the same assessments, all the states don't use the same models, that it casts a negative light when sometimes that's an undeserved negative light. I'm not saying we shouldn't get better, but I've also traveled around to other states, and there's ways to color data.
Yes.
And we don't do that.
We are not going to.
So I'm proud of that. So I just want everyone to hear that you guys are working hard, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and we need to get better, there's no question about it. But when there are these national statements, like, okay, what are the criteria that you're using to reach those
Yes.
conclusions? Because lots of times, in my opinion, as a professional, it's flawed.
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, as I've shared with you since you have hired me, that's why we're going to use multiple measures, right? There are different ways to look at our kids being successful within our school system. I'm going to say it again, yes, the state assessment is a very important data point, but it is not the only point that helps us to say, are our students learning and growing as we move forward? And we're going to start to talk a little bit more about that. And I have these two lovely ladies with me this evening, and we'll talk through that. But I want to answer any more questions specific to that data before we start this next process. Or presentation, I should say. It's not really a process. Any other questions? Okay. So I'm very excited. As the superintendent, I'm going to start with just how proud I am of our community. This past, and I'm going to sort of take us backwards to get us to where we are. And so I'm just going to start with, and I'll close up a little bit because we're going to sort of do this back and forth between the three of us as we share information with you of where we're going. So again, I showed you where we are from a data perspective, from the Oregon Department of Education perspective, and then where we really are wanting to go with our strategic plan and continuous improvement process. So I'm going to start when I originally came to Central School District. The first time I met with our staff, right in August, I asked them 4 questions. What are our dreams for our students? What are the dreams for our families? What are the dreams for our staff, and what are the dreams for our community? And if you were there, I had over 400 staff pretty much take stickies and just tell me what is important to us. And so that was done, which really gave us the 4 strategic goals. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to these lovely ladies in front of us. With us this evening is Julie Hammond. She's our Director of Student Services. And then also with us today is Director Charmin Ensminger. She's responsible for instructional technology, equity, and access. Part of that now falls underneath her is she is helping to build our data systems, because a couple of her staff are specifically, really are the people that send the data to the Oregon Department of Education and are helping us build our system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to start.
Okay. So when we're looking at this beautiful presentation, we're going to cover the goal areas that we are addressing first. And the first goal is student growth and achievement. And our vision around that goal is that every student is engaged, supported, and challenged and prepared as a whole child, so that we can make sure they're successful in school, career, and in our communities.
And so our second goal is really around family involvement. And this is where we're fostering that relationship where families actively involved in their children's education, feeling welcome, supported, safe, and valued.
And the third goal is community partnership, where our vision is that partners engage in collaboration with Central School District. We want to be able to cultivate student success and have an environment for our kids that's safe, healthy, and prosperous, and that we are doing that with an inclusive community.
And the fourth one is really around staff leadership and continuous improvement. And this is where staff is engaged in that student-centered decision-making, the collaborative problem-solving, professional development. We focus on that continuous improvement and sharing that purpose, teamwork, respect, and trust to drive decisions.
Just to give you of where we are at this point, so this past spring and, really past winter and spring, the district engaged students, staff, and the community in chats to gather information. And we specifically asked questions about what are our strengths in the district, where do we need to improve, what opportunities are we not thinking about, and what are the challenges across the school district. The district also gathered information on how we're going to hold ourselves accountable and identified accountability benchmarks. Throughout this process, school district data, just as I showed you, and other data was shared with the community, parents, and our staff throughout these processes. There were a total of 19 community chats last spring, specifically open to our community. It involved our Latinx community, our faith-based, a couple of just open community chats for anybody to come in. We also reached out to our governmental agencies and our businesses. So again, intentional about some of those, but open to the public for a multitude of those, and as well as 7 staff chats this past spring. This fall, we actually just completed last week, I believe, our final 6 chats to share the overall direction that we're going with the strategic plan, and then to just gather any other concerns, comments from the community as we went through that process. And so this evening, we are going to generally share with you, because again, we have a document that I shared with you in the Friday report, the extensive document that we are required to turn into the Oregon Department of Education. That is really a combination of our strategic plan and our continuous improvement process. I have that plan, and again, Charmin and Julie will go through a majority of what the 10 key objective areas we will focus on for the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm going to say that again. We have identified through the chats with the community, with our staff, 10 objective areas that we will stay focused on for the next 3 to 5 years. That's how intentional we need to be about this work, and I, again, am very excited to what our community and our staff brought forward as we did this. So there's also 15 accountability, which, again, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Charmin.
So one thing that I think is pretty powerful and worth noting is, as we hear Dr. Kuvista talk about the 32 community chats, I was able to attend a workshop at the ESD mid-September, and when we were describing some of the work that we did around that stakeholder input, our efforts were actually held up as a model to the rest of all of our regional partners. And so some of that foundation and groundwork is really specific to us, and I think a true testament to the leadership that we're under. So really exciting that we were used as a model. So within our strategic planning, we have these accountability benchmarks. And so the 15 benchmarks that you see up here represent these metrics or these kind of concepts that we're going to build some of how we're going to hold ourselves accountable. Now, in this, we need to develop the metrics. So we're ultimately going to determine establish the criteria really on how we're going to know if we're meeting the expectations, with the exception of 5 of those. So when you look at number 2, chronic absenteeism, or you look at number 4, in the 9th grade on track, you look at number 7, the English language arts, math achievement growth that was just described through our Smarter Balance assessment, you look at 4-year graduation rates, and then you also look at English language growth and progress. Those 5 metrics metrics are already set for us. The state of Oregon has defined those. But the others, it's really up to us. So we will do some of that work in-house, but we also have some of the resource available to us through the folks that we're using, the company that we're using to build our data warehouse. We have some expertise in those ranks as well. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach. We, of course, will always get guidance from the Department of Education. We will determine some of those metrics on our own, and we'll also use really good resources at our disposal. But again, those 5 are already set for us, and the others are going to be works in progress. But it's really a key part of the strategic planning, knowing how we're going to hold ourselves accountable.
And one of the things I've asked as we start to build this, and the company that we're working with, they're called 5 Lab. Part of this, is that correct, 5 Lab? It's called Forecast. Sorry, thank you, Cease. The company's called Forecast 5. We do have a work with them. Cease has really worked with them on the budgeting side, so that's partly why we went with them, because they're able to do that. We are going to build, and Charmin has already shown me a couple first looks of it, to be able to look at our data once it is built in trends. So both in cohorts, so same students, but then also, can we look at a 3-year trend as an example of that data? So again, we'll continue to share that information with you.
So I'm going to start with our strategic objectives, and just to give you a framework of what this is going to look like. The first slide for each objective will give you the objective and the goals that it's referencing, and then the slide after will include some of our current work and what future work will look like, okay? So our first objective is around exploring and developing plans that's tied into behavior sports, focused on the positive behavior interventions that we're already doing in our schools. This is really to create a supportive learning environment for all students. And as referenced, the goals 1 and 4 relate to the goals that we just reviewed prior to the diagnostics.
So in that, and I'm going to start and share this, and then I'll be quiet. Every objective is tied to a goal. It could be tied to multiple goals. So again, that's where we just want to be clear, and we will get this in a different form as we start to, we got to get it approved, right? So I have to have you approve it tonight, so then I can hopefully get it approved by the state, and then we'll start to build things that will be publicly available to our community to look at.
Okay. So with this first objective, the current work that we're doing is with our positive behavior interventions and supports teams. We have those at the district level and then in each of the buildings. Our future work will be focusing on social emotional learning and multi-tiered systems of support.
And multi-tiered systems of support is both supports on the behavioral side, on the academic side, and on the social emotional side. So when we talk about whole child development, academically, behaviorally, socially, and emotionally, really ties together from that perspective.
So objective 2 leads into another area of behavior, but a little different lens, focusing on our mental health supports and social emotional learning with a trauma-informed lens. In the district, we were recipients of the state grant, and so we had significant work that was done at the high school, and the K-8 systems had some training and support, but this will be driving to helping these systems with K-12 focus instead of just the high school. And again, the 3 goals that this is related to are noted on the end of the slide. Current work, this year we have hired additional mental health professionals. So now in all 5 schools there are equivalent of a full-time mental health professional in all 5 schools, which is great. The middle school and high school saw a pretty good increase this year, which is exciting. And then also the continued work with our Central Health and Wellness Center. Future work will, as the previous slide, we'll be looking at the social emotional learning and multi-tiered systems of support. Our third objective is looking at the middle school and high school and expanding on our career and technical education courses and programs, looking at increasing electives, internships, and continued supports to advance placement classes, honors, and college courses. And this is really to help support the success of students in school, career, college, work, and community. current work, the work that has been done with middle school and high school with AVID. There's been multiple presentations and information shared around the program that's been implemented, I think, in year 3 this year. Before and after school programming, and then our high school success. Future work will be continuing with CTE, which is the college career technical education, with the CTE pathways, and then working with our Business Industry and Education Coalition. And that is a group that really was started with Mona K. Hines and the Community Consortium, bringing multiple businesses, community leaders, school district, Western Oregon University together to talk about how do we expand some of the work that we're doing in this area. Meets monthly, and it's a really good collaborative group. And I think the Gate Foundation's a part of it. There's a lot of community partners, both in business and in social services.
Yeah, and this is specific to Polk County, and they are really working to how do we develop internships for students. So this group is really, what's that work look like? How do we get that involved? And we're going to start to, there are some pilot conversations that are beginning with that.
Our fourth objective is expanding on programs in arts, physical education, extracurricular activities, and the expanded learning opportunities, all focusing on the development of the whole child. Our current work, a big focus is in our before and after school programming. In future, or now and future, is expanding our summer programming and exploring the expansion of PE time in schools.
That is a state law, so we will have to start working towards that.
Objective 5 is long-term planning, which really encompasses quite a few different tasks. One of them being looking at class size and then condition of our buildings, capacity of our buildings, not just the condition. Also looking at skilled professionals that have specialized training. And one of the areas that was talked about was mental health and just general health services through our school nurses, and then an evaluation of our FTE. Our current work is we do an evaluation of our class sizes, and that's ongoing, but a heavier focus at the beginning of the school year in the second semester, and then future work will be the long-term or long-range planning committee.
And I'm going to pause if there is anyone that's listening and is interested in being on that long-range planning committee. Please feel free to email us at info@central.k12.or.us. All we need is your name, a way to contact you. We are starting to, there will be an application, but we do have, if there are interested people that were interested in being on this long-range committee, we ask you to feel free to email us and get involved with us, because we think it's very important to have great voice across our community as we start this process.
Okay. Objective 6, looking at our K-12 alignment. So schools and levels have done a ton of work on systems alignment within their buildings or levels, and so now we want to continue to expand that to be K-12 with the Common Core Standards, assessment, programming, curriculum instruction, and building on our frameworks, and really with the whole idea about supporting the whole child. So it's not just one class, one grade level, but how are we supporting kids so they go through the system in a real comprehensive, planned out way. We're all working together. Our current work is the alignment of the essential standards at K-8, interim summative reading assessments and reading interventions. And over the last 2 years, the middle school has implemented significant, or 3 years, 3 years, reading interventions, supporting our EL students and other students that have demonstrated a need for additional instruction. This year, last year and this year, elementary programs have had additional reading supports. For future, we want to look at an adoption of a K-5 literacy framework, beginning some of the literacy adoption process, and looking at our emergent bilingual plan, that also, all those things would be tied in with our multi-tiered systems of support for students.
Okay, so number 7, the This objective is, we're exploring and developing a family involvement plan where parents are actively involved and engaged in their child's education. And so you're going to find this embedded in goal number 2. So some of the current work, we have a really nicely established foundation for the community chats, which are now really well attended. And then the future plan is to develop a family involvement plan. And some of this is not entirely new because through some of our title requirements, we have been doing components of this throughout the years. And the next one, we're exploring and developing community partnership and resource plans where community involvement supports the development of the whole child. And you're going to find this embedded in goal number 3. And again, that already established practice of the community chats is a really nice foundation for this. And it's worth noting that this kind of communication piece, this is really kind of a through line in a lot of the strategic work. And then the future areas to explore: community partnership expansion, and then, like Julie mentioned, some of the business industry education coalition, really looking for those kind of untapped resources and areas to grow there. And number 9, we have our decision-making process with an equity lens to ensure supportive learning environments where every student is engaged, challenged, and prepared, right? This is about success for their future. And the idea of this equity work is really a through line through the strategic work. Equity isn't just a bucket of something that we do. It's really a concept embedded in all of the work. The last strategic objective is fostering relationship through the open two-way communication, through student voice. And here we have a perfect example tonight with 2 ladies sitting alongside our school board. So we have parent community voice and collaboration as we're trying to really develop this welcoming, safe, healthy, and supportive environment for student and family. So again, these last objectives, 9 and 10, very intentionally, you'll see that there aren't any goals aligned with those because, as we call it, that through line, these are practices throughout the strategic planning process.
So then what the next steps look like. Tonight, I will be asking the board to, because we do need to finalize the strategic plan and accountability system as well as a continuous plan. Again, and we want to submit that this month to the Oregon Department of Ed so we can get approval. Once that is done, we are going to, now the schools get to go through this process. So again, I talk a lot in the accordion. Because it's not one way, it's both ways in how we do this work. So our buildings will develop what we're calling a building-based or school-based continuous improvement plan. And that will have to be aligned to the district strategic plan and accountability system. We are continuing to build that accountability system, and our goal is for public view and dissemination in the fall. We're hoping to have some of our first looks this spring. I want to be clear, it takes that long. What Charmin and her team are doing is we are having to make sure we have clean data. And so we already have dumped some of our data, and we can see that there are some pieces that we need to on the backside clean up as we continue to build this. And so that's some of the process as we move forward with that. And then finally, really focusing on, we'll be working with you this summer and into the fall to set goals for all of these accountability benchmarks. There's some information, and I'm going to, with the Student Success Act, we're hearing some of that longitudinal data for the 5 metrics that Charmin shared with us. We may get guidance on how to set our goals specifically for that data that's tied to the Oregon Department of Education, but the rest, we get to look at that trend data and start to establish what that looks like over the years. And then again, we're going to build annually, minimally, of how we are going to share the overall with the community community and our staff the growth and achievement within the strategic plan and those accountability benchmarks. And then we'll continue to review and monitor plans throughout the years and adjust accordingly when needed. This strategic plan is really focusing on the next 3 to 5 years. We have to be very intentional about this work and stay aligned and focused on that. And then the last piece to that is we will continue the community and staff chats. I don't know what that's going to look like, but again, obviously, as we continue to build this, going out and gathering information from the community in different types of forms. One of those is on the accountability is a culture and climate survey. That is one way that we will be able to gather input from our community, and that actual metric will be for our students, for our staff, and for our community. So again, some of the questions will be very similar. I've shared in the community chats. You need to ask certain questions of your students and your staff and your parents, because your staff may be here and your students may be here and parents may be in the middle, and we have to have a conversation of why do we see things so differently, because again, we're trying to align the work moving forward. So with that, I'm going to pause. Questions? I'm going to say these two lovely ladies have been side by side with me, and then I'm going to say a little bit cease of some of the things that we've been having to pull to really build this plan. I have spent probably 4 days holistically with these lovely ladies building and rewriting that plan that we sent you in the Friday report. And again, once that we have that approval, we will get it up on the website, and then we'll have a couple different versions to share with the community moving forward. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that was a part of the chats. I'm very proud of this community. I think this plan is what the community shares. We made a few adjustments to it based on some feedback over the 6 chats, and then we did also have a chat that was specifically with our union leadership, CEA, OSCA, and administration also had a review of the overall plan together. So with that, questions for us?
I got one.
Jerry, yes.
Going back, we could flip back to objective 4.
Okay.
The second part of it where it says the future expansion of summer programming.
Yes.
Some of that summer programming could be
I know where you're going, but go.
Internships for kids working in welding shops, restaurants, automobile repair places, anyway, stuff where they could actually maybe spend a half a day every day or whatever, so they could actually get a little bit of hands-on experience in various things and vocational things, because not every kid's going to go to college.
Right.
And if they, for example, work down at Schwab's, lining up front ends and brakes and tires and such, and there's some career potential there, and in a lot of other enterprises.
Yeah,
So-
and the business and industry coalition that we are a part of is building that process right now. So you're right, it is going to be very exciting to see that. I know also Principal Servagnan and her team, they're in the process of surveying students at the high school of what other career pathways from a career and technical education do you want to go into. We have really 3, and Ms. Servagnan, please correct me if I'm wrong, 3 pathways in agriculture. One is horticulture, one is livestock management, one is welding. We also have business accounting. We have a new business and marketing, videography, fair to say, pathway, graphic design, and I'm missing one more. Ag construction. So we already have 7 pathways, and there are also after-school clubs right now that are both fire science, so students that may want to get into firefighting, and health occupation, so just more of a general piece. There's also talk at the high school, again, generally coming from students as well, about computer programming as a pathway too. So we'll continue to, Jerry, again, as I told you when you hired me, this is an important pathway, because kids not all kids will go to college. I want them prepared for a career. I want them college ready, but If they want to go down that career pathway, we want to give them those pathways to have internships, to have that apprentice, so when they're walking out of high school, they're going to put themselves in a good place if they want to go into career and earn a really good career.
Did you have something, Don?
No, I was just pointing to Jerry because he was waving his hand over there and Jen wasn't looking at him.
Sorry, I would have gotten there.
I have a couple of questions. Well, I think that's very well done. I think you guys deserve a lot of credit. I like the way things are connected. I am curious about what I will call the soft verbs in there.
Yep.
Versus more of the action-type verb that one usually sees in a plan like this. And for instance, on that slide, the word explore makes perfect sense because of the state law requiring that. But there's several, I started to write them down and then I stopped. But the future box is filled with very soft verbs.
Yeah. So part of
is that purposeful?
It is purposeful because, again, the district strategic plan is really a 30,000-foot, this is where we want to get to. These are the key areas. What we're going to do on the building level, it's really working with the buildings to say, hey, how are you actually the day-to-day in the school? What does that look like? So, yeah, it is a little bit general
Very
right now,
general, right.
because we are going to work with the schools as they build their plans. There's going to be key things that Perry says, this is, as an example, Perry probably will put in his plan that for social emotional learning, they are doing a program called Character Strong. And so he will articulate what that is, he'll articulate when that happens, he'll articulate what that actually looks like as an example to within that. At the elementary level, again, there's one of the things tied to social emotional learning that some of our school elementaries are piloting is called zones of regulation. It is a way for kids to identify what feeling they are in right now, as an example, right? If I'm a red, I'm not ready to learn. If I'm a green, I'm good to go. And so again, part of this is that high level, but then we're going to show you from the school-based how that all aligns together.
How it's actually going to get done.
How it's actually going to get done.
Okay.
You bet.
The other thing I wonder about, and it's probably a done deal already because you put so much work into it, but boy, 10 goals.
I would say 8 objectives, because the 2 that Sharman talked about with the equity and the communication, those are really through lines. So we want to be able to communicate. I want our students to have voice. I want our staff to have voice. So that's a constant. And again, part of this is if you look at the data from what I crunched, there's actually a top 30.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
There's a top 30 list.
But the question is, what's doable?
Correct. So based off of that, I felt the focus needed to be first and foremost on the top 10 areas. Really, it's 8 in my opinion, with the 2 through lines.
Well, and some are required by the state anyway.
Correct.
But I guess I just wanted to make that comment that that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, but there's actually, there's 4 goals, and then there's the 10 or 8 specific objectives that fall under, but the objectives are very big.
Right, they are. They're very large.
And that's why I'm going to keep saying to the board and the community, this is a 3 to 5 year process.
Okay.
The goal is not to change unless we have great success and we say, hey, we've established this and let's look at potentially another one.
And there's also just a few typos in that if you're going to take that public.
Yes.
So
I know
you
we
caught
will
that
fix that.
already.
So I have a question. So in our business agenda, you're going to ask the board to approve something along of this, a strategic plan.
Yeah, the document that we gave you in the Friday report. It is, it is not, because that is not, so here's the hard part. That is not a public document yet until the Oregon Department of Education approves it. So it's sort of a weird step we have to do here. I'm asking you, based on what I gave you in the Friday report, that lovely document that we have been working through, I would like you to approve that so I can take it to the Oregon Department of Education. I will take that then and submit it to the Oregon Department of Education with a handful of other questions I'm required to answer from a federal level. And then there are 2 options that will happen. One is they will approve it as is, or second, they will say, we're going to approve, but we'd like you to look a little bit more in depth at this area. I will tell you, I had the Willamette Education Service District Department of Research and Evaluation. I handed the report over to them because they're looking at all the reports in our region. We have received rave reviews of the comprehensiveness of our plan, and that the comment I did receive is that this plan actually is going to set us up beautifully for the work ahead for the Student Success Act, and that to some degree we are in a pretty good spot as we have to take those next steps here coming next year.
So here's how I would summarize it. So the board has been involved in this process all along. So this is not the first time we've seen this material. And this has been an effort that's culminated over the last 18 months or so. We're at a point now where we know what our goals are, and we now have been presented 10 objectives. And I think those two things are really important to walk away here if we're going to approve this strategic plan tonight, approving that. The tactics, the things, the future, to Jan's question about why are some of the things worded softly, it's because as a board, we would not approve a specific program in a building. So I think that's the focus of what we're approving. The document that you then take forward is, your detailed representation of that, but there needs to be room in this to allow you to do the iterations and work with that document as you need to as it rolls out to the buildings and back up to the state. So it's a kind of a tricky one.
Agree.
But I would focus the board on goals, objectives, and the accountability system. And recognize the process that we've been through to get to this point with the variety of different inputs that were made along the way. That document that we're going to actually approve, it's more detailed really than what a board would typically approve,
Yes.
but you need that, you need our support in order to take it into the process that we're talking about.
Correct.
Make sense? Okay. That just helps set the stage when we get to the business agenda. Personally, I think the 4 goals and 10 objectives make a lot of sense. I think this is a great time to actually put you on the spot, and it might be hard to follow everything that we just talked about, but if you think about, I'll just state them again here. So do you guys have them there?
The 10 goals?
First of all, the 4 goals: student growth and achievement, family involvement, community partnership, staff leadership and continuous improvement, and then the 10 objectives that we talked about that Julie and Charmin presented. Does that make sense?
Yes, and how are we presenting this to the community? Are we presenting all of the objectives, or is it just the 4 goals? Because I feel like it's kind of confusing when you're trying to explain the objectives and the goals.
Yeah. It's a great question, and we'll continue to. That's what we did this fall, is we did a similar presentation, but a little bit different, had a few more visuals for the community to see. But again, I will show you, the document that we are required to turn in is 39 pages.
But it's going to be a combination of high-level goals.
Correct.
And then the objectives to get to the goals, and then the specific plans start to get detailed out in this document, as well as what each of the schools will develop to go with that. That actually makes it very specific. So
It makes more sense. So what we're turning in is a detailed list of what we want, but what we're actually presenting is a more broad goals.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So in this, the actual document that will go has specific things in there. So for example, because I know both of you at the high school, right, we have done a lot of work on the trauma-informed. So under the mental health, it says, as an example, one of the key things that we'll look at is how do we expand that work that's been done at the high school and move that K-8 as an example, right? So we're starting to make that a little bit broader. I know you all at the high school came to us 2 years ago, said in the spring, my first year in the spring, about concerns of mental health, right? And the supports. That was the number 2 overall identified objective in this plan. of which you guys started, and I'm very appreciative of that.
One of the things that, I would challenge you to do is take this and go back and look at it and see if you can get it to the point where it's kind of simple, 4 goals, 10 objectives. Because how we get that message out and to talk with, through the, your roles in the high school or power peers or however, that's part of the secret of making these plans successful, is that people can see the work that they're doing in those 4 high-level goals and then the 10 objectives, and everybody feel like they're working in the same direction. So that's partly why you're here and why I put you on the spot. Or a lot of why you're here.
Anything else you guys would want to add?
I had a quick question, just because you said that there's like 30 goals and you kind of narrowed it down to what was doable, but I'm guessing that there's more than 4, and I was just wondering, like, what was your criteria to pick your top 4 goals?
So there were over 3, so the little stickies when we talked about strengths, opportunities. So when I took all of that data over the summer, there were about 2,079 stickies, to be exact. So I took all of that data and I started to categorize it, right? So if someone said we need more mental health, that went here. If somebody said behavior support, so I just collected the data. So those top 10 are the top identified areas that our community and our staff identified. So I have 30 of them. One example is, I think it's number 28 or 29, is tied to nutrition services. Again, a lot of that work we're already doing, but it's good that it's on that list. So again, I think that will become a conversation. So the top 10 are really statistically data identified by our community and staff, what they want us to focus on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should keep moving, because we still have other agenda topics and an executive session that we need to get to. So let's keep it snappy. Thank you for that update. This brings us to now the financial and program reports. So, Cease?
Hi, everyone. Yes, we're spending money to try to make all these things happen. So this is the detailed financial report as of September 30th, our first quarter. And so technically, you would want to have received about a quarter, or 25% of your revenues, and spent about 25% of your expenditures. So if you look at the column on the right, you'll see how close we are to those things. And as I mentioned in the narrative around that in your board report, the revenue never looks like that. One of our line items is property taxes, and about 80% of that comes in November. So it doesn't show us receiving very much by September 30th, but that will change. Our primary source of revenue is our state school fund, general support. If you're looking at the yellow budgeted column, you'll see that's $26 million of the $35 million we plan to bring in. And that's divided into 11 payments a year. So as of September 30th, we'd actually received 4/11ths of them instead, because we get a double payment in July. So that one's front-loaded. So it varies on the revenue side, but we shall see as that progresses. The expenditure page, again, typically you want to be at about 25%. And if you look at a line that's about 10 up from the bottom line on that, it shows you our subtotal of expenses prior to the reserves, which we hopefully don't spend, or if we do, we move them up to spend them, but we're at 24%, so we're about right where we need to be this time of year. I would entertain any specific questions or be glad to go over this in more detail with anyone at another time.
Funny to me was 310, which is instructional, professional, technical services. It's $1 million budget, and we've only spent $73,000.
Yeah, so that is, for example, we have substitutes
So
in
is
that.
that's where
Teaching substitutes will be in that line item. We don't use many in July and August. So a greater portion of that budget line item will be during the school year.
By the time I retire from the school board, I'll know what all of those lines mean.
Don, you're so far ahead on this stuff. That's one particular line, expense in there.
Okay. Any other questions? Are we doing the food service update?
Yes.
Mr. Singer.
And that's, the link is titled SSA, so you're going to start hearing that more and more. That's the Student Success Act. And there's a portion of that that is, relates to nutrition services. So part of the overall $2 billion is taken off the top for different programs that doesn't reach the schools directly. And student nutrition is one of those.
Good.
Community eligibility provision or program.
Provision.
And this is, we've talked before about districts you can look at making all of your students free lunch. And it's under the community eligibility provision. So.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yes, we will continue with the alphabet soup of SSA and CN and CEP. And I know that in the past, Peggy has shown a lot of interest in CEP for our district. And this is something that will take us towards that. Of the $2 billion that Cease mentioned, about $40 million will go statewide to the child nutrition programs. The two basic directives of this program to us will be CEP for all students, so all students eat for free, and K-12, and mandating breakfast after the bell for schools with 70% or higher, free and reduced. And in our district, projections are we will be required to serve breakfast after the bell for all three of our elementaries and our middle school, and we'll have the option to do it at the high school. What breakfast after the bell means does not mean we have to serve. We can't serve before. It means we have to continue to have breakfast available after the bell has rung. How long after is being defined right now. I was part of the stakeholder committee, and that's since been pushed up the line towards the legislatures to finish defining what it means, but it will offer more opportunities for students if they come late, and if their bus gets them there right as school starts, to make sure that they have food available. For the CEP for the lunch, what this will do is, the documentation you have might be a little confusing. We threw a lot of numbers at you. Basically, CEP, the way Oregon is, what they're trying to do, where they're calling it Oregon Pays, because right now the federal government pays with CEP. The free students are up to 130% of the poverty rate, and the reduced students are up to 180% of the poverty rate. So free meals are going to the students that are up to 185%. With this, what they're calling Oregon Pays, or Oregon Paid, will take that number up to 300% of the poverty line, is what the goal is. And in our case, we will be able to push free meals for all our students at the reimbursement rate. They are assuming, they're estimating at 90%. So for every, say we served 100 meals for a round number, of those 100 meals, we would turn that claim into the state, and 90% of them, they would pay at the full free rate. And the remaining 10% would be paid at the paid rate, which is around 30 cents compared to about $3.30. And so these numbers projected, I give you 4 numbers in 2 different options here. That's how much we would make using our numbers from last year. So for this comparison, I took our 2018, 2019 numbers, so we know what they actually were. applied the new formula to those numbers, and we have the number on the left, the claiming number. And now you have one on top and one on the bottom. The one on top is if everything came out perfect the way it was and everybody paid, but that also takes into account students putting money on their account ahead of time. So the lower number is a more realistic number, and we would compare those 4 numbers that are vertical down the center of the line. Those are at 90, 85, 80, and 75% if the state paid at that rate. They're not 100% yet of what percentage they're going to use. They're running those numbers. They're running a lot of models. They're asking for a lot of information from the schools. You know, what would you do? Here's your information. How are you going to claim the schools? To take a step back, there's 2 sections for this Oregon Pays. The first one is for schools that are higher and free and reduced as a district, and it will encourage more schools to go that route, because then the state receives more federal dollars, and then the $40 million will stretch farther. The option for schools in districts that are under the 40%, the state will kick in more money because the federal government will only pay up so much. Does that make any sense?
And I'm going to add to so as we showed in the presentation, so last year we were 58% free and reduced. Right now, based off of the numbers that shared several weeks ago, we're at 61%. Our highest school of poverty is IES in 77%-ish. Next is Talmadge at 66. After that is Ash Creek at about 63, I believe it was. And then the high school is 54%, and then MES is about 50%. So MES was a little below 50% this year, so they are back up a little bit as well.
And then those are October 1st, which most of our numbers are related to. When it comes to CEP, though, we are required to use April 1st numbers. So we will have, so I based this for when I went to do the 2018-2019 school year numbers for this display. We went back to April 18 to look for the 18-19 school year. So we'll be doing the same moving forward in April of this year to get a solid number of what our numbers will look like.
This will go into effect in fall of 2020?
Yes.
That's correct.
And am I reading this right, that the red numbers mean we would be getting less?
Than we did doing the traditional claiming method. That's not necessarily putting us in the red as a department, but compared to the numbers from last year run traditionally versus this.
So depending on what that percentage rate that the state finally ends up with, we could potentially end up worse off rather than better off.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I'm getting that picture.
That's always been the case when we've looked at community eligibility, because we did have a high percentage of paid lunches, and so it was always difficult for us to figure out how that would advantage us financially, even though, of course, we would love to advantage all of our students. That advantage that we carried has lessened with the unpaid lunch balances. So now we have to take that into account, right? If you go to community eligibility and every student eats for free, we don't have the unpaid lunch balances anymore. We're not subsidizing for that reason. We might be subsidizing because the state gave us the projection that they would cover 90%, and they only end up covering 75%. And so a lot of variables in there, but it is something that the state was going to release this information on November 1st to say that they are pushing schools to do those sort of what-ifs, and we wanted to do our analysis and let you know that we are looking at that.
And at the OSBA next week, Heidi Dupuy from the ODE Child Nutrition, she's heading the child nutrition part of the Student Success Act. She will be there to speak to you next week.
Your
to give you more
OSBA
information.
conference.
So this is something we'll be monitoring over the next few months as the state
absolutely
starts to implement SSA. You'll be back to give us more in terms of where
Yes.
we're going to land and what you think our position on CEP will be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we will go forward. It's a matter of where we end up, and we will look at as many options as we can to make sure we land in the best spot.
What do you think the message the board should have if approached by the public? What should our statement be about what we're looking at here?
I think the most important thing to focus, what this is all about, is having more take away the worry of hunger from students so they can focus on their education. This takes away a roadblock.
And a part of SSA is more funding to that end. Exactly the mechanics of that, we don't know yet, but that is the goal.
Yes.
And I think that's important because, again, a lot of the focus was on the classroom-related objectives of the Student Success Act. There's $1 billion of it that actually is going to these other things, including early childhood, increasing the reimbursement we give for special ed, and moving this pretty incredible, I mean, I think they're saying Oregon would be in a better position than almost any state in the country by having 300% of the federal poverty level, potentially having students in that income range eligible for free lunch.
There are cities that have tried similar programs, but we are the first state to do something like this. And I think this will really be a strong advantage, not just to our district, but to the student state all over the state.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. That's
Okay, I
all
think
we
that
have for
brings
you
us-
this month.
Thanks, Cease. I think that brings us to superintendent reports.
All I have real quickly is a couple of policies that are in first, so this is information only, and if you have questions, please reach out to me. So the first one is a minor edit. It's BBFA under board governance. It's specifically board member ethics and conflicts of interest. There were 2 small edit changes recommended. We have already approved this, but because the OSBA came back to us with those edit changes, they're going to go through the first reading again. So again, just a minor adjustment. Policy DFAB, which is under fiscal management, investment of bond proceeds. They are asking us to delete our version of that. It is an older version, and so I believe there's going to be new guidance coming out, but they have asked us at this point to remove that policy. The third one, DFAC, again under fiscal management, is investments of operating funds. Again, how we, if we were to do that, again, the policy is, I believe, is going to be revamped, and so they're recommending that deletion. The next one, JFCF, which is under students, specifically hazing, harassment, intimidation, bullying, menacing, cyberbullying, teen dating violence, or domestic violence, and the domestic violence is the new addition. This is an updated policy with additional language identifying domestic violence as a category. It also clarifies retaliation for the victim. It also identifies staff behaviors if they're found to be in violation of this policy, and then clarification of the reporting process if that does happen. And then the last one, JFCJ, which is again students' weapons in school. This is updating its minor changes to this policy. In definition, it gives clarity on items subject to seizure and forfeiture. Our current policy, as an example, so toy guns is one of those areas that potentially is a part of this expulsion process. And I use that, a pocket knife as well. So again, that just identifies a little bit more of those. And then it does allow, there is language in there that allows me on a case-by-case basis to modify the expulsion. So if you bring a weapon to school, you are expelled for a year. However, if we have programming that can still support learning of students, even though that they are in that, it gives me on a case-by-case basis to make those decisions in conjunction with the expulsion hearings, et cetera, moving forward. So again, those are first readings only. Please reach out to me if you have questions or concerns. And then the last piece I'm just going to share, and our students shared, I had the opportunity to watch at the high school Raising Student Voice and Participation. It was fantastic. I watched a young man in a special education class pull information out of our students. They were very thoughtful in their approaches. I think the high school received a lot of good data to really start looking at really different things that the students are wanting to bring to the table. The second piece, I got a lovely text from Miss Wildfang. On Friday, she actually had an appointment, again, focused on student voice. There were 2 fifth grade students that actually came in and set a meeting with her to advocate for a change in their morning processes of how they enter school. She showed me and had these 2 fifth graders had laid out questions and processes that they had questions for her. So again, I will just continue to share the great things when I see, especially when we're talking about voices and student voices within our schools as we keep continuing to build. That's it for me.
Any questions? Okay, for the board updates, we have our next board meeting on December 2nd. OSBA conference coming up this next week. Can I see a show of hands of who will be attending the board conference? Okay.
Vidal is also going, as well as Darcy. Both are going.
Okay, great. Our next board retreat / PLC would be on Monday, December 16th at 1 o'clock.
Part of it will be my evaluation. The work that we're starting with OSBA, and then we may have some additional guidance. Allegedly, ODE will have out the first guidance for the Student Success Act. So we are waiting for that to come this month, so I'm hoping by that time I'll have had enough time to have it and dig into it to then be able to bring to you of what those next steps are going to look like for us from a school district.
And I want to say that our PLC meeting this past month, when we had our administrators join us, I thought was one of the best PLCs we'd had in a long time. I really enjoyed those conversations. And we wrangled with the test data, or the state level data that we looked at earlier tonight, not all of it. And I think we all walked away shaking our heads at just how difficult it is to make sense of that data. But at the same time, it's important to try to get some themes out of that, which I know that you all are working on, and we will continue to monitor that. But also the discussion that we had around the strategic plan, and I think each one of our sessions if it's ODE feedback on SAA, we'll obviously be talking about our strategic plan. So we'll continue to talk about our role in helping to develop and support that. So those meetings over the next year to really support what we're about to vote on here are going to be really important. So make sure you block out that time. Okay, any questions for me? Okay, that brings us to our consent agenda. So we have minutes from last month. We have no personnel recommendations, and we have the policies that are stated in our package that we would have done first readings on last month. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Don. Is there a second? Thank you, Peggy. Any questions or comments? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to our business agenda. So back to our superintendent.
Yeah, I am just looking for an approval to move forward to the Oregon Department of Education with the Central School District Strategic Plan and Continuous Improvement Process as identified tonight and in the document that we have shared with you.
Do I have a motion to approve the Central School District Strategic Plan?
I'll make a motion to approve the Central School District Strategic Plan and Continuous Improvement Process for submittal to the Department of Education.
Thank you, Peggy. Is there a second? Jerry, thank you. Any further comments about what we're about to approve? Or vote on, I should say.
I would echo what you just said, Steve, is that we need to bring this up and explain it as many times as possible between now and the end of 5 years when we're done with it.
Oh, don't worry, we will.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and then call the question. All in favor of approving the strategic plan and district improvement plan, please raise your right hand. And we are unanimously approved.
Thank you.
So go forth and conquer.
Thank you.
If they want to use it as a model, you should make them pay us for it.
We've already, and I'm being transparent, we've already been requested to present what we have done.
Get a copyright on it.
Okay, so that comments by individual board members as we start to wrap up here. And as a reminder, we do have an executive session that we need to adjourn to. Any comments?
I have a comment.
Jerry.
I looked up the education system in Canada. I am a very poor innovator, but I'm a great imitator, and if somebody else is doing something that's working, I'm going to copy it. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Anyway, just a couple of stats. Their literacy rate is 99%. Their secondary diplomas, 93% of the population has one. Post-secondary diplomas, 68%. Compulsory education, some of the provinces it stops at age 16, some of it goes to age 18, or a high school diploma. And the part I like the best with is there is no federal education department. So that is the key. Anyway, just for what it's worth, I don't know if
There's a lot of good research, Jerry, that comes out of Canada, and please know I read a lot of that, so that I appreciate that comment.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, any other comments?
I just have a couple. I wanted to thank the parents that came forward to speak tonight. I think addressing student safety is really important, so thank you for sharing your story and for being so positive about what was a very scary experience. I think you did a really, really good job, and that is something that I know we will be considering in the future. Jessica, I think, isn't here right now, but her comments about activities on Sunday. I'm teaching a class at Western University this term, and one of the questions I asked my students was, what are things that you remember about school that were stressful? And one of the things that came up was we are too busy, and now we have to do things on Sunday. So I was happy that was brought up, and also I just really appreciated the OSCA and the CEA reports. They were very informative, very helpful, and they were full of really good details or analogies. It was really helpful, so I want to thank them for that.
Absolutely.
I'm a part of the Power Peers leadership group, and we were taught the day before we went out and taught the getting input from the students to help improve our school. And I think that it was really helpful to have students asking the questions to other students, because we all experience like the same thing throughout school, and I think that some students are afraid to tell staff and teachers what they think the school isn't doing too well on. And I think that we got a lot more input that we wouldn't have gotten if teachers were teaching that lesson.
Oh, that's a great comment. Yeah. Okay. So we will be adjourning into executive session. Under the provision of ORS 192.660, open meeting law, the Board of Directors will enter executive session for the following purpose: to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, or to consider the dismissal or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or agent, unless he or she requests an open meeting. So we are adjourned to executive session.